Minthara, the one companion that many of us may not have even known was a potential companion on our first, second, or dare I say even third playthroughs of Baldur's Gate 3. Minthara is perfect if you're planning a more evil run, or if you support women's wrongs. For a while, you were only able to recruit Minthara if you betrayed the Druid's Grove in Act 1, or exploited a few bugs in the game that were kind of weird. Now though, you don't have to rely on glitches if you just knock her out with a good old non-lethal damage in the Goblin Camp. However, I think most of us are betraying the Grove for her anyway, because you may have an easier time romancing her if you do that. Also, a lot of people like her Goblin Party romance scene, and you can't get that anywhere else. I can't really show it to you, mostly because when I tried to do it myself, the game glitched and gave me Astarion instead. I am not kidding, here's the proof.
There is one who yearns for you in the dark. Who will you seek?
We have so many choices.
Your
Minthara.
heart skips a beat.
I've never seen this before. I've seen part of Minthara's romance model swapped, but I've not seen Minthara's.
I hoped you would come.
That's not Minthara, but okay.
I have missed you.
But Minthara's Act 1 romance scene is one of the more explicit romance scenes in the game from what I've gathered, so probably not a good idea to post it on YouTube anyway. But horny women lovers aside, Minthara has a lot more to offer than just sitting on your face. She's one of those characters who has a lot going on, but it's mostly under the surface. And today, I want to unpack all of that. We are going to structure this video a bit differently than the other unpacking videos. Instead of going through Minthara's story in order of when it's revealed in the game, I'm going to start with her background and how that's shaped who she is, and then take us through the events of the game and the things that we learn about her. So, I'm just gonna go ahead and say spoilers for the game. Also, it should be noted that much of her vulnerabilities are only revealed when the player is close with her, so that's important as well. But let's take it back to the beginning, right? Long ago, I don't actually know how old she is, but at some point in the past, Minthara was born. She was born into the ancient house of Bainir in Menzoberranzan, and was raised as a noble, living the dangerous life of a high-ranking drow, surviving assassination attempts basically her entire life. The way Minthara talks about her past, it's seemingly lighthearted in a sense. She almost has that, hey, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger approach to life. She's endured a lot, and that's a testament to her strengths and her power. Drow culture is a matriarchy, so Minthara would have experienced life much like men do in our world, the privileges of being a part of the group that makes the rules and whatnot. But Drow culture is also harsh, and followers of Lolth, the Drow god that Minthara is sworn to, and was likely raised to worship, are known for cruelty. Lolth is like an evil god or whatnot in D&D, so followers of Lolth do not have a very good reputation. When I go off script, I just get all my words jumbled. It's crazy. Now, Drow are one of those races that are victims of fantasy racism. A race of people who are deemed as evil because, hey, that's what they are. It's backed up with the main Drow god being a cruel and evil-aligned god as well. I personally do not like this avenue of storytelling because I think it's kind of boring and maybe a little bit lazy. I'd rather have a more tangible reason as to why someone is bad, what their motivations are, maybe an exploration into how the harsh environments or society they were raised in caused their morality to be a little bit more evil-leaning. Not this blanket statement of that's just how Drow are. And it's also often used as an excuse to engage with being racist in a way that is deemed more acceptable because certain types of D&D players refuse to recognize the real-world biases that make their way into fiction. But yeah, no, the dark-skinned race being evil because dark-skinned race is evil, no questions asked, surely isn't based in real-life racism, is it? That was sarcasm. But whether or not I enjoy this kind of storytelling, this cruel and evil-aligned drow culture is what informed a lot of Minthara's worldviews and shaped her life experiences. And for the sake of a more compelling character, I don't think there is an inherent evilness in her. It's something that she learned from the way that she was raised. It's not built into her because she's a drow. Minthara mentions how she had an attempted assassination on her as a baby, like an actual baby still breastfeeding, like small baby. And she also mentions how when she came of age, her own mother, a figure who she should have been able to depend on and always feel safe around, attempted to murder her as well. But she does not talk about it like it's a traumatic experience for her, the way it would have been for literally any other companion in this game.
I survived my first assassination attempt while I still suckled at my mother's breast.
That's wild.
I tasted her blood that day. She covered my body with her own, and a blade bit deep into her chest, almost puncturing her heart. When I came of age, she tried to take my life herself, and I gave her fresh scars to match those she earned protecting me.
A dangerous upbringing, it made you strong?
Yes. My house trained me to be a soldier in Lolth's service, and my mother showed me how to survive the perils of society.
It almost sounds as if it was a coming-of-age ritual, something that was so normal. Minthara is totally unfazed. It was a way for her to prove herself, a way for her to learn and get used to the world. It was just another part of her life. Minthara was trained to be a soldier in Lolth's service, and her mother showed her how to survive the dangers that awaited her. Minthara shares how house matrons would have to deal with assassination attempts, and in a way, it makes sense for her mother to make an attempt as a way to teach Minthara how to defend herself and deal with an attack when she was no longer a child. It was honestly an act of love, I would argue. We can see this theme of exposing someone to danger in a controlled environment as an act of love with Minthara's poison kisses if you are romancing her. And she also mentions that she doses herself with poison to build immunity, so you probably should as well. Drow do have poison immunity, and Minthara is building up hers even more because she's worried. And she wants you to build yours up because she's worried about your ability to withstand poison as well. So she doses you through kisses to build immunity. And that feels like an act of love. It's something that she does out of care. And I think this kind of maybe not mirrors her mother's assassination attempt on her, but I think that comes from a very similar place. I feel like this is backed up with the idea that Minthara did not kill her mother. She just caught her and injured her, and I think that's a show of her care and love. She speaks very highly of her mother in her own ways, and this is seen more clearly when Minthara meets Jaheira's family and comments on how sad it is that Jaheira has basically neglected her children, failing to prepare them for the fights ahead. In her eyes, it is a mother's duty to prepare her children for their future, killing and fighting included. She wishes to thank her mother for it one day by being the one to teach her mother to die. It's not an act of malice, but passing on teachings and support. We all die, drow are not immortal, but Minthara is aware enough to know that her relationship with her mother may not be the model for others. She realizes that wanting to kill your mom is not a normal way of showing love in most societies. Which I think is kind of neat, that she's able to express her love in this way and also know that that is very specific to her and the environment she grew up in, and she knows that, like, maybe I shouldn't be the blueprint. That's basically the bit of Minthara background that we get that I feel is kind of like necessary to understand her character. She comes from a very dangerous society, and to her, surviving the dangers is kind of like top priority, and just because somebody attempts to kill you does not mean it was necessarily a malicious thing. So I guess we could kind of see how drow culture is a little different. And it definitely has shaped the way Minthara shows her care and affection in her life. The first time we see Minthara, she is standing in a tower, watching the Nautiloid fall from the sky with Dror Ragzlin by her side. We have no way of knowing who she is at this point, or the fact that she's a real character and not a nameless NPC witnessing the Nautiloid crash down to the coast. This is kind of fun to put together after playing the game a couple of times, and I really wanted to mention it. I'm sure everyone watching this video already knows that she's in that opening cinematic, but she looks so good, and she's just doing her thing. Minthara, at first, is just one of the leaders of the goblin camp that's causing chaos in Act 1. She's the leader that's really running things and taking control. The other two leaders seem to answer to her. She's mentioned a few times as just the drow in places like Joaquin's Rest, and it's pretty clear that everyone else has to obey her. Minthara is incredibly confident, and she has the power to back that confidence up. For most of us, our first real impression of Minthara was that she was a pretty powerful paladin that was kind of hard to fight, depending on your own class and party makeup. If you're playing as a bard, she will kick your ass, and that's just how it is. Extra so, if you never actually spoke to her and you started fighting the other goblin camp leaders from the rafters, there are no rafters when you get to Minthara, so you have to be on equal ground with her for the most part. Yeah, that is how I did it my first time playing the game. And I do it multiple times, every time. However, if you get to speak to Minthara before pissing off the entire camp, you get to officially meet her.
Mistress! It's me, your loyal servant, Sazza. I'm back, and I brought a friend.
How thoughtful. And where did you find this friend?
They was in some rickety druid grove, mostly full of tieflings, but them intruders you're after were hiding out there.
I presume you dealt with my prey and massacred the rest.
Well, the thing about that is, they sort of massacred us. But this mug helped me to escape. I say we stick a few holes in him. Show how grateful we are.
Stick a few holes!
Caress your mind as the drow
What does she
praises
mean
you.
by that?
Oh dear. Your prisoner is one of the Absolute's favorites, Sazza. A true soul.
Nah, it can't be. They was in the grove, hanging around with the tieflings.
Undercover, no doubt. Carrying out the Absolute's will.
Minthara is pretty focused on one thing, and that's raiding the Emerald Grove, in hopes of finding the artifact that you carry. This early in the game, though, the focus is more on the Grove than the Astral Prism, because at this point, there's a good chance you may not even really know, like, what's going on with that. If it's your first playthrough, you don't know the full depths of that story just yet. You are kind of put in a position where Minthara is probing your mind, looking for information, and you can either refuse to share information, try to give her wrong information, or lead her to the grove yourself. If you lead Minthara to the grove, you'll have a chance to still fight off the goblins and try your best to protect the tieflings. But if you've taken Minthara this far, chances are you intended to sacrifice the druids and the tieflings for the Mintharacy. The Drowacy? Taking on the grove, Minthara is ruthless. She does not care about the innocents and hunts down every last living soul in the grove, including the group of children that are hiding underground. Literally, everyone is demolished, and it's an easy slaughter. The tieflings can't put up much of a fight, but Minthara does not dwell on that. She will kill whoever to attain her goals, and right now her goal is seeking the Absolute's favor by obtaining the artifact and committing atrocities in the Absolute's name. She's very firmly in the wrong. Just very firmly in the wrong, and it's so interesting to see her be so unabashedly in the wrong, and that's fine. Like, it's not fine, but, like, for her, it's fine. It's not like Astarion, where there's, like, this push and pull of, like, he's kind of thinking about it, but also, like, he could be talked out of it. And, like, it's a completely different situation, morality-wise. After the emotionally harrowing experience of slaughtering all the tieflings, Minthara is victorious. She revels in the display of her strengths. She's proud of what you all have done, and despite not retrieving the artifact, she still celebrates. The Goblin Party is what replaces the Tiefling Party, which is good for people who want to play evil but still have an easy chance at romance, since that is the easiest way to trigger Act 1 romance scenes for most of the companions. However, unlike her good run counterpart, Halcyon, Minthara can also be a romance option at the party. Also, like, the Goblin Party vibes are just terrible. Everyone is miserable and having, like, the worst time. Astarion is very visibly, like, uncomfortable and, like, a little bit afraid of you. Shadowheart is, like, trying to drown the misery and guilt with alcohol. Like, the only one having a good time is Minthara. And maybe you. And also, like, the goblins, but they're not companions. At the party, Minthara is not shy about seeking physical pleasure. One thing about Minthara is that she uses the Tadpole connection to express this desire with you, and that is often how she likes to communicate throughout the game, especially when it comes to more intimate conversations. The actual sex part of the scene is not super important to an analysis of her character. Y'all just have a good time. She's a little bit dominating, and that does fall in line with how she behaves normally as well. So, unlike Astarion, there's nothing to, like, nitpick with that. However, after you sleep with Minthara, she does have a bit of a heart-to-heart with you. She shares how, despite being righteous and doing what the Absolute asked of her, she only heard you. The Absolute's presence could not be felt the way it usually was. Her Tadpole has been disconnected from the mainframe, like our own. Anyone who's played the game before will already know this is due to the Astral Prism, and the Emperor has decided that Minthara is a useful enough pawn to unplug her from the hive mind. But Minthara does not know this. All she knows is that she did what she was told, and her god seems to be giving her the silent treatment. And despite this being a worrying sign for most who follow a god, Minthara finds it comforting. But she does seek an understanding of what's going on. At this point in time, we cannot tell her about the Astral Prism. It's not a good idea. The artifact signals fear to us, urging us not to pick the dialogue option that tells Minthara the truth. She cannot be trusted with this information quite yet, so we pick something blasphemous. Is Minthara's faith faltering? Has she been abandoned? Or is the Absolute not what she thinks? Minthara does express a little bit of fear when you tell her that the Absolute is not what it seems. Minthara is afraid of this questioning being heard. She's afraid of the consequences if the Absolute were to ever know. Minthara is loyal to her god, but that loyalty is motivated by fear. She shares with us how she felt the love of the Absolute, the true, overpowering love that it can provide. And that is the main selling point for, like, most types of spirituality, is feeling the love and comfort of your god. But Minthara has also seen the Absolute's wrath. She spends more time telling us of the horrors that she has witnessed, striking fear in order to reinforce the loyalty that is expected. Those who turn away are disposed of. They die, pretty horrifically at that, or at least screaming is what Minthara says. Minthara clearly does not want to end up like those dead deserters, but she does hear you out when you state that the Absolute cannot reach her when she's with you. You are, in some ways, a little bit of a sanctuary for her. For Minthara, so much has changed since she left the Underdark and became a true soul. She shares how she does not recognize herself anymore, which is a pretty stressful and scary thing to go through. It's very easy to lose your sense of identity when going through the type of manipulation and grooming that is typical of cults, like the Absolute cult in the game. As your actions and thoughts are warped to best suit whatever group you are in, you become someone unrecognizable, and that's what Minthara is struggling with. She seems to brush that away, though, because being with you was her choice. It was entirely Minthara in that moment. And being with her has granted her the peace that she has not felt in a very long time. With this silence in her mind, Minthara feels more like herself again. She assures you that her time with you was all her, but she is still in the Absolute's grasps. She must pray. And that seems to be it for this conversation. However, afterwards, she will come up to you as you sleep, ready to run a dagger straight through you. She'll talk about how she's prayed to the Absolute for answers and wanting to know why you were chosen despite being so broken. I really thought this was like a Dark Urge specific, but watching some cutscenes and doing a little bit of research, I think she says this to everybody because it's in reference to our absenceness, like the way that our tadpole doesn't plug in to the Absolute. So I'm pretty sure that's what she's talking about, but I did think that she was like calling me out for being the Dark Urge and having a broken brain, because the Dark Urge does have a broken brain. Yeah, all of my Minthara runs are Dark Urge runs as well. I just love Dark Urge. Minthara speaks as if she is a religious fanatic of sorts. She's very dependent on the Absolute, and despite the fear she shared with you earlier, she is clinging on to the Absolute. Minthara is scared of the idea of the Absolute being lost to her. She does not want to be abandoned by her god, and she's clearly been dwelling on that silence that she felt with you, especially when she didn't receive a response to her prayers, so it makes sense for her to make the assumption that whatever absence was within you, you'd infected her with. So to cure herself, you had to be disposed of. It makes sense. And this, like, fear of abandonment, not wanting to lose this god that she honestly is afraid of and was comforted by not being connected to, speaks to this, like, deeper desire that Minthara has to be loved and accepted and have a place to belong. And this is like a reoccurring theme with her character as well. In the heat of the moment, though, Minthara shares that while she stood over you, ready to kill, the Absolute returned to her, stating to purge herself of doubts. Minthara would determine if you are worthy, to decide your fate. I have a theory that this was actually the Emperor trying to keep us alive, but it could have also been a strategic release on Minthara as well, since it seemed that the Absolute was planning on us to keep going and do our thing all the way to the end. If you finished the game before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you've not finished the game before, don't watch this video because I will spoil the ending of the game, as I kinda just did. But if you don't care about spoilers, then I guess you'll find out when you get there. With this newfound mission, Minthara gives us instructions on where to meet her again, and how to traverse the Shadow-Cursed land safely. And with that, she's off, never to be seen or heard from again until you reach Moonrise Towers in Act 2.
I will not be slandered! General, you saw my reports. You know it's not my fault.
Once you make it into Moonrise Towers, you can actually find Minthara being questioned by Ketheric and Commander Zrel. She did everything she could, but it was not enough. Minthara failed to retrieve the artifact, and therefore she must be punished. Minthara fights, begs, pleads. It was not her fault, but that does not matter because she ultimately failed. Minthara scrambles to paint herself in a better light. She blames her failure on the subpar warriors. If she were given drow warriors instead of goblins, she surely would not have failed. Or so she says. I love Minthara, but the quality of soldiers was not the issue here. But I can't let them know that I'm here to cause problems, not yet at least. But in Minthara's eyes, she could have achieved her mission if she was given the right tools, maybe even the right information. But she was not given the tools necessary to thrive. However, Zrel turns Minthara's words against her, asking if Minthara is blaming her failures on Ketheric Thorm, or even worse, the Absolute. This forces the blame back onto Minthara, pushing her into a corner. Minthara failed to see results, so Minthara is the one at fault. In the eyes of Ketheric and the Absolute, Minthara is incompetent, and that must be punished with death. Ketheric is kind of like weeding out the people who aren't useful right now at this part. Like, he is done. As he says himself, faith is nothing without action, or whatever that quote was. So, he's done with people who don't do what they're told, or who fail to do what they're told for whatever reason, even if it is genuinely not their fault. Minthara's fate is effectively sealed. She's whisked away to the prison, begging for mercy. If you're playing as Dark Urge and try to defend her, Ketheric will call you both mad dogs, which, in my opinion, sets up a level of camaraderie with you and Minthara and plants seeds of doubts within her. Not only did you stand up for her, but you are also seen in the same disrespected light that she now finds herself in, despite her knowing that you are capable. So if the two of you are strong and capable, and you're both disregarded as mad dogs, then maybe the Absolute Cult and Ketheric are not everything they're cracked up to be. If Minthara's story is to continue, it is up to you to find her in the prison and help break her out. She's being held and psychologically tortured in a room that's near the entrance. She's not in the prison cells yet. The two cult members that are torturing her poke and prod at her insecurities, calling out her bloodlust, mocking her for her desire to have acceptance, like we all don't crave for a place of belonging and unconditional love, invading her privacy and diminishing her to nothing. Minthara's mind is being fractured, her strength drained. She is being erased. The final steps of fully stripping her of her identity, tearing her down, and throwing out what makes Minthara Minthara. It's the natural progression of her loss of self that she's kind of already shared with us. There is no room for individuals in a cult, and Minthara is no longer useful to the cult as is. She struggles against the psionic storm that ravages her mind, fighting against being broken down and fighting against submitting to the Absolute and becoming a thrall. Honestly, Minthara is doomed by the narrative, but if she's made it this far, we can save her from the narrative, rewrite her story and give her a better ending. If you reach out to her mind, she shares how she prayed you'd come, but no god was left for her. Abandoned by Lolth, abandoned by the Absolute, she has no one. Her tadpole that was destroying her mind is afraid of you. It's probably the work of the astral prism, but Minthara doesn't know that just yet. And together, you can help Minthara extract revenge on those who sought to break her, which is kind of fun. Also, the fight was harder than it needed to be, in my opinion, but I was playing in Tactician, and I was a silly little sorcerer, so that might have been why. Afterwards, Minthara shares what happened.
I last left Moonrise as a commander in the Absolute's army, obeying the voice of a god. I thought I had found a home and a purpose.
Now I leave as an exile. But you risked your life to rescue me. For that, I am grateful.
She thought she'd be welcomed back as a hero of sorts. She didn't expect to be imprisoned, nor did she expect to have her thoughts erased. Having your identity stripped is incredibly dehumanizing, and can really affect a person in the long term. Minthara losing herself to the Absolute and to the tadpole in her skull, and the added erasure afterwards, creates a situation where she's pretty much going to have to rebuild herself. Unlike Lae'zel or Shadowheart, Minthara had a very strong sense of self before her life was dictated by a cult. She doesn't have to discover who she is, but instead recover who she was. Coming back to oneself after a traumatic experience is a weird process, to say the least. Luckily for Minthara, part of what took her away from who she is was the tadpole influencing her mind and kind of controlling her. And once she's allied with you and falls under the protection of the astral prism, that's kind of a non-issue, and she also is no longer under the influence of the Absolute. So this is going to make the process a bit easier for her. But it would have been really fascinating for the game to dwell more on the aftermath of Minthara's time with the cult. But also, Minthara is the kind of person who is more focused on getting revenge on those who wronged her, instead of processing and healing from said wrongs. So I guess it does make sense for the game to not dwell on all of the emotional side effects. So, like, yeah, it makes sense. Minthara is also Halsin's counterpart in the sense that you typically got one or the other as an extra companion depending on how you play the game, and Halsin doesn't have too much going on either in regards to an in-depth story and like emotional character arc that is like seen on screen and it is explicitly explored in the game. So in that sense, it also makes sense that Minthara would be more action-based than an emotional journey, although she does still definitely have an emotional journey that is on screen, unlike Halsin. Not only does Minthara have to rebuild herself, she's also struggling with the grief, mourning the home that she thought she had with the cult. Her life has changed once more, but that's fine, I guess. She's grateful for the way you've risked your life to help her, and that's kind of what she's focused on in this moment. Minthara is fully aware that her survival was basically your choice, and while she may not take on an "I owe you my life and here's this eternal gratitude" persona, she still shows her gratefulness in her own ways. She offers you her power, allies with you in your fight against the Absolute, even if you're someone she would initially look down on, like a male drow. She allies with you regardless of who you are, and that's pretty cool. Also, like, I am aware that she does want to extract vengeance on the Absolute, so, like, it's a smart move on her part, but she sees us as somebody who is good to ally with because of what we've been able to do to help her. After she's had a bit of time to decompress at camp, or while traveling with your party, Minthara is ready to share with you how she's doing.
It does not compare with the comforts of home, but your camp is almost palatial in comparison to my previous accommodation.
Fair.
Thank you for allowing me to come here, and for bringing me back to myself. Each memory that returns to me is more disturbing than the last. The things that I did in the name of the Absolute. The things that were done to me. They broke my mind.
She mentions how she has these memories flooding back to her, the atrocities that she committed in the name of the Absolute. She mentions how each memory is more disturbing than the last. This tells me that while Minthara may be cruel and not as morally upstanding in her own rights, she still has limits. And the Absolute pushed her past those limits, made her do things even she would consider too far or just downright wrong. The game never specifies what these atrocities are, that's kind of up for interpretation, but I do feel like she does feel bad for needlessly slaughtering the Grove and all of those tiefling refugees inside. Is that a bit of a stretch? Maybe. There's really no telling, but I do think that is the case, and I have some future evidence that might back that up. There's also the fact that later, when she asks why we killed the tieflings, the way she reiterates that she was not in control of her actions tells me that she would not have done that on her own. That's one of the atrocities that she now regrets, or hates that she did while under the Absolute's influence. What she does specify, though, during this conversation, is that she also remembers the horrible things that were done to her, the ways in which the Absolute cult broke her. This is also the thing that she seems to be the most upset about. Her expression changes to one of hurt and sorrow, and she feels that she'll never be safe. You'll never be safe, while the Tadpole and the Absolute still live. You must eradicate the cult, starting with Ketheric. In a way, Minthara's companion quest is literally just playing through the main story of the game. She's a paladin of vengeance, and she really does take up a quest of vengeance against those who have wronged her. Minthara wants to seek out justice for what was done to her, and for her, that means eliminating Ketheric, Orin, the Absolute, or taking over the Absolute if you decide. She does support that pathway wholeheartedly. Either way, though, she seeks to regain her power against those who hurt her. Minthara is a victim, and she resents being put in the victim position. Her main priority in healing is regaining and exerting her power and getting vengeance. But regaining and exerting her power is also, like, getting vengeance is part of that, so that was a little redundant. While I do think regaining your power is a crucial step in healing any kind of trauma, Minthara is more focused on it than any other companion, to the point that it is her main thing. Whereas other companions who have that element of regaining power also have other things going on the narrative focuses on. Minthara's story could have focused on her struggles with abandonment, finding a place she belongs, but those are the backdrops to her search for power and vengeance. Before she fully allies herself with you and helps you take down Ketheric, she needs your promise that you will keep her close until the Absolute is dead. She needs reassurance that she won't be used and cast aside when no longer useful. She needs to know that she won't be abandoned again. If you slept with her at the Goblin Party, Minthara finally understands now that while you may be different from other true souls, it was the prism that caused the silence she felt in those moments. However, it was still you who held her in your arms, touched her mind and body, connected with her on a very human level. She sounds pretty earnest here, and I think at this point she's kind of already caught feelings for you. I mean, you did just save her life, and she already knows she enjoys seeking physical pleasure with you as well, so it's like it makes sense to make that jump. Minthara follows that earnesty up by warning you that kind words do not come easy for her. She's making an effort to let you know that she feels fondly towards you, but also that expressing this sort of sentiment is a little difficult. In this moment, your minds connect and you get a full view of Minthara, her danger, her cunning, her brutality, but also her wounds and her paranoia. But above all else, you see her complete loyalty to those that she trusts. To you. I do love, though, how after this level of vulnerability, Minthara just moves on and is focused on exacting her vengeance against the cult. Wage war on the Absolute. She's got priorities here, and dwelling on her affection for you is not as high on the list in this moment. If you are playing as the Dark Urge, though, Minthara is a little bit more cautious in trusting you at first. She explains how in Menzoberranzan, there's a name for people like you.
There are those within Menzoberranzan that we call Kalith Carthan, those driven by blood. They are the mad, lost to all reason, and subservient to nobody.
These people are driven by bloodlust that they cannot explain and are totally mad, lost to all reason. They serve no one and are even too much for Lolth. She worries that you are like these people, controlled by the bloodlust beyond comprehension. Minthara is concerned that your urges may lead you astray, be it concern for her own safety, concern for how you may jeopardize the mission, or concern for you as a person. She doesn't directly specify, and I'm willing to bet it's a mixture of all three, but it is kind of nice to see her be concerned about you as a person, even though there are other things for her to be concerned about in this moment. Minthara does approve of the reassurance that you are in control of yourself, though, even if that is not entirely true, especially if you are resisting your urges. Because if you're resisting your urges, you have a lot more opportunity to lose yourself to the urge. She doesn't want to see you be controlled, even if she does have selfish reasons for it this early on.
I will never tire of sitting on dead men's thrones.
After defeating Ketheric, Minthara has this really cool gloating scene on his throne, and it's honestly really fun. But she also shifts focus to the next target of her vengeance. Orin. Minthara worshipped Orin. If you ask if Orin was an old flame, Minthara does not confirm nor deny. She only states that there is no reason to be jealous. Her only thoughts of Orin now are of the agony that woman will face at her own hands. Although, people do love a good messy, toxic Yuri moment between Minthara and Orin. Minthara does share with you how Orin was the one who indoctrinated her into the Absolute cult. Minthara recounts how when she first visited Moonrise, she stood before the Absolute in awe. The love, the power. Orin promised her that Minthara was chosen to be a true soul, blessed and adored. But now Minthara knows those memories were false, planted into her brain via the Tadpole. In reality, Orin held down Minthara while a mind flayer forced a parasite into her brain. She recounts how Orin laughed at her fear, mocked her. Minthara is eager to repay that cruelty. It's also at this point, you and Minthara can start to plan to take over the cult, do what Orin and Ketheric could not. It's near impossible, but with the prism and your courage, Minthara thinks you guys have a good shot. Reshape the world with the power of the absolute, become equals with gods, and Minthara promises by her oath that she will fight with us. Minthara is done being a pawn of the gods. If you are romancing Minthara, you get more insight into her vulnerabilities and how her time with the cult really shattered her sense of identity. I think you can also get this without romancing her, but I was romancing her on my playthrough at this point. So I think I was. The game definitely was acting like I was romancing her, even though I didn't actually get her cutscene. So back at camp, when you approach Minthara after defeating Ketheric, her mind reaches out to yours first. It's an old habit of her time as a true soul, and she does apologize for the way she probed your mind when you first met. She promises to never do that again. It was a total violation of your privacy, and it would be a violation of the trust built between the two of you. But she does specify that she will not hesitate to probe your mind if she feels you are hiding something, which, pop off queen. Minthara then goes on to say that she was not sure if the two of you would actually grow close, just being allies of circumstance. But now a deeper bond lies between the two of you. She asks to touch your mind again as herself, with her mind totally being her own. And she has no issue with you reaching into her mind as well. Only if I can see your thoughts as well.
Of course. I do not hide anything from you. Until my time in the cult of the Absolute, I had spent little time on the surface, except to raid and pillage. I did not expect to find any outside the Underdark who saw the world as I do, and wanted from the world what I want. I did not expect you.
She tells you that she doesn't hide anything, and then goes on to explain how when the Absolute first fell silent, she feared being alone, left in a world that fundamentally misunderstands her. She didn't expect to find companionship or understanding in you. Depending on what race you play as, the specific wording here will be different, but the sentiment is the same. Minthara goes on to explain how you're different. You're not like the other surface dwellers or the other male drows or whatever. The first surprise in her long life that didn't result in scarring. A pleasant surprise. Minthara explains how before the Absolute, everything in her life was certain. She knew that she was destined for greatness because that's what she was born into. She knew that her privilege also put a target on her back. She had to be wary of poison, hidden knives, any danger that could be lurking behind friendly gestures. She couldn't freely seek out pleasures without these worries looming over her head, but she still found ways to be happy. She knew herself and understood the world she resided in. She had a place, and she knew exactly what that was. She had a place where she belonged. But now she doesn't have that same understanding and certainty and belonging. The future is still being shaped, and she no longer has a god to lean on. No Lolth, no Absolute. It's just Minthara and you against the world, and she has no idea how that's going to turn out. She went from having everything figured out to being thrown into the darkness that she must find her way out of. It's not all that dissimilar to graduating school and being thrown into the real world where you realize just how unprepared you are and you now lack the certainty of a school schedule to keep you grounded, or the upset of a sudden disaster or tragedy can bring into someone's life. Literally everything about Minthara's future is now different from what was mapped out for her. Life is not going as she thought it would, and now she must learn to adapt and press on and how to cope with all of these feelings of uncertainty and stress that she's quite literally never had to deal with before. But she has you by her side, and she can lean on you for support.
I knew myself, and I understood the world around me. Now, nothing is certain. Without Lolth, Without the Absolute, without my home, I do not know myself. But you do, I think. Show me myself through your eyes. Let me see what I am to you.
Minthara asks to see herself through your eyes. To me, this feels like she's trying to piece herself back together with how others see her. Who is Minthara? We'll start with who she is to those who are closest to her. Those who spend time around her and see her in a candid state. But it's also her trying to get a gauge on how you feel about her and if her affection is reciprocated. I do find it fascinating how she prefers to use the Tadpole connection to communicate this whole moment. She wants total certainty that what you're conveying is the unfiltered truth. When you let her into your mind, you feel the doubts that wear her down. For all the strength and willpower that she has, Minthara is riddled with second-guessing herself and doubt. It's hard to say if she struggled with this before her time in the cult, but I can say that her time as the Absolute's true soul definitely did not help if she was already struggling with that. It is specified that the worst of this murkiness and this doubt is around her sense of self, and I do wholeheartedly believe that this is from her time as a true soul. It's at this point where you can decide if Minthara is a lover, a friend, an ally, or just a survivor, a monster. I've only ever chosen the lover option here. Even when I ultimately chose not to break up with Astarion for her, it was the hardest decision of my life. But when you show her that she's a lover, if you are romancing someone else, locked in with that someone else, she is disappointed. She wants you all to herself. However, if you don't have that dilemma, her cold outer shell melts away to show her warmth and her passion. Minthara states that she's never lacked confidence, but she is frightened by the conflict ahead. She doesn't know if the two of you will survive, but she wants to spend whatever time she has left fighting by your side and lying with you at night. Minthara is yours, and you are hers. The one thing that she can be certain of in this uncertain time. As you move into Act 3, Minthara's focus is now shifted on exacting revenge on Orin. She places all of her feelings of fear and trauma from her time with the Absolute onto Orin. And to be fair, Orin is the scariest out of the three chosen, and Orin was the one present when Minthara was tadpoled, so this shift of blame makes sense. When you play as the Dark Urge, Minthara is in awe of your nature. She's also the only companion who is openly admirable of the Slayer form, and once you learn of your past, she supports you in taking your inheritance as a ball spawn. And that's just more fuel on the fire that is seeking revenge against Orin. Orin is also the only person we see Minthara express legitimate fear for. And to be fair, Orin is built up to be a very scary and formidable foe, and she does spend the start of Act 3 basically toying with us, shapeshifting and lurking about. Minthara is rightfully afraid. Once you finally beat Orin, though, Minthara can't believe it. She can't believe that Orin is dead after everything. Minthara shares how she wasn't sure that she had the courage and strength to survive Orin, and how she couldn't have done it without you. Minthara does not feel relief, though. Instead, all of her worries and anxieties are now turned to the bigger picture. You will never be safe while the brain is still free and you are infected. But at least you're still alive and Orin isn't. Minthara really cannot catch a break here. She does not let herself revel in the achievements along the way because her survival is not secured yet. But she does her best to remain optimistic as the finale comes closer. You all mustn't lose hope. If you are romancing Minthara, though, in Rivington, you can take her to visit Zenitho at the circus and do a love test with her. The love test is a really good way to see the baseline of who a character is, so we are going to talk about it. Zethino describes Minthara as a mask of ice hiding a heart of fire, and honestly, yeah, that's her. That's just her. But the love test also touches on how Minthara misses her home. the culture that she's left behind. It's a part of Minthara that is mentioned here and there, but takes a backseat to the rest of the story. She misses the Underdark, she misses the food, she misses living there, it's her life. And in some ways, maybe she feels she can't get that back, or maybe she has to do this journey first before she can even consider going home. It's a little unclear, and we do know there is a returning to the Underdark ending with Minthara that you can choose, so she's not left that behind forever, which is pretty good, because it sucks to be homesick, and I hate that Minthara is homesick this entire time. But more importantly, or a better look into her character than just being homesick, the final question that Zathino asks is, what is the worst thing that Minthara has ever done? The options you have to pick from are slaughtering the Grove, being captured by the Absolute, or turning her back on Lolth. I do think the reason that all three of these are answers is because she does regret all three of these to some degree. She does approve of saying being captured. I don't know if she approves of the other two, but Minthara remarks on how she's haunted by whatever weakness allowed them to take her. It is her biggest regret, and it is the thing that was the root cause of the other two options. This hammers home just how damaging being wrapped up in the cult was for her. I also find it interesting how Minthara does not mind her business being laid out in front of a stranger like this. Astarion will be understandably upset if you are totally honest in the love test, because it's exposing his vulnerabilities and his deepest fears, and it's very uncomfortable. But Minthara does not mind that discomfort. She acknowledges these vulnerabilities and seeks to grow from them. While it may be a point of shame, they'll also serve as a point of comparison to see how far she's come in the future, to see how much she's already healed and grown in the present. Minthara does seem to come back to herself as the game comes to a close. She's sure of herself once more, secure in her relationship with you, and eager to fight the fight ahead. If you are playing as the Dark Urge, Minthara is supportive of you regardless of what you choose. If you are choosing to resist your urges and defy Baal, Minthara is in support. You shouldn't be a god's pawn, a god's plaything. You are your own person, and she knows the pain of losing yourself to being a pawn for a god who does not care about you. But if you choose to reclaim your birthright and become Baal's chosen, she is supportive in your quest for power. She knows the feeling of that greed, and she encourages you to rule over the world, even if it's in Baal's name. Power is power, and Minthara is your ride or die, and I love that about her. Most of the companions are not happy about you becoming Baal's chosen. Astarion is pretty chill with it if you are playing a route where he's ascended. I don't know how he feels about it if he's not ascended. I think if he's not ascended, that's where you get the, like, he's worried that you will become lost. So I think even, like, non-spawn Astarion is not vibing with it, but Ascended Astarion is. Shadowheart hates it, regardless of how evil you've pushed her to be. Like, Minthara is the only one that is, like, unconditionally like, yeah, babe, get that birthright, do your thing. And I think that's really interesting. She's also, like, the only companion that's, like, evil, but, you know, she loves you. She's a ride or die. As far as the ending of Minthara's story goes, if you do the controlling the brain ending, whether it's for Baal or not, you don't get any epilogues or finales. I am making this video before patch 7 drops. Patch 7 may change this statement. Either way, we see Minthara smile and not be a thrall, since she is your partner and she was in support of it, and that's kind of it. It's left up to interpretation if the two of you rule the world together and drive it into ruin if you're doing it for Baal. However, if you do not take over the world, Minthara is more focused on how you all have reclaimed your freedom. She doesn't say it often, but Minthara does really value taking your life into your own hands, and it's a great relief to not have to worry about the tadpole in her head taking over. If you've romanced her, you have some options on how her story can end. You could either return to the Underdark with her, setting up your own house together. This one is cute because she talks about how her mother must miss her and how her mom likes competition. It's a dangerous life, but it's a life with Minthara, and that's all the joy you need. This is personally like my favorite one because I know drow culture isn't set up for like the really cute, like, I'm gonna take you home and you can meet my mom and then we're gonna do like this silly little rivalry thing, but I love the idea of it, and it puts Minthara back in her element. And if you are playing as a drow, it makes sense. If you're not playing as a drow though, it's up to you as to whether it makes sense for your character or not, but I like this ending. Minthara doesn't have a bad ending in my opinion, as far as I'm aware. I mean, obviously, if you kill her or let her stay imprisoned in Act 2, that's her bad ending. But as far as, like, epilogue endings you can pick, she's pretty chill. If you don't pick the Underdark ending, you could stay in Baldur's Gate with Minthara and seek out leadership here. This is similar to the Underdark in the sense that the two of you will create your own house with your own names and seek out taking over as much as possible. The two of you scheme and gain the debts or favors of as many people in the city as possible, with hopes of ruling the city one day from the shadows, maybe even rebuilding the Steel Watch and marching them into Waterdeep. I guess she didn't really like Gale. Either way though, Minthara really was born for greatness. At the epilogue party though, Minthara is a bit nervous. She is not in her element, and she's a little, like, anxious due to the way parties in her past went. Spoiler alert, not well. But despite her worries, it is still pleasant. But she doesn't really connect with the other companions the way that they connect with each other, and she believes that they just don't like her. And that could be due to the fact that she is the only companion that is objectively evil. She's not like the others where she had the capacity to be heroic and good. She is who she is and was not in a place where she needed guidance to figure out what her values are. No other companion is objectively evil like that. They all had the capacity for good in a traditional sense. Minthara's character arc was not focused on pushing her to be a certain way. She ends up basically the same regardless of if you support her good behavior or encourage her to be cruel and evil. Instead, her arc is more centered around how a cult can affect your sense of identity and regaining your power afterwards. I do really appreciate the way Minthara really hammered home just how much the Absolute altered her mind and her perception of things. It's an aspect of this game that I feel like gets overlooked a lot. She often talks about how it was like a drug being under the influence of the Absolute, how she didn't feel used at the time and was eager to serve, the way that the love and the power promised to her were used to control her, the way that her eagerness to obtain said love and acceptance was essentially used to break her down. Cults are just like that. I know, but it's equal parts fascinating and heartbreaking to see such a strong-willed person like Minthara fall victim to this type of manipulation and wearing down. It's also cathartic to watch how she rises above, regains her power, and finds herself again with the support from those who truly care for her unconditionally. Minthara doesn't get a redemption arc. She's not presented as a character that even needs one. Unlike Astarion, the other character that most people say is objectively evil, which I don't think is true, but that's a conversation for another day. Unlike Astarion, Minthara does not have a secret soft side or an inherent goodness that you can support and encourage to see more of. She's just doing her thing, and you can either side with her or not. The only secret soft side she has is just the ability to love, and even evil people can love. Like, that's just a very human thing. Despite her bad morality, Minthara is still such an intriguing and lovable character. And I also just think she's the funniest companion, and the delivery of her lines are so good. She has a very dry sense of humor that I personally enjoy, and I just think her voice is hot. I just like hearing her talk. Anyway, I love Minthara, and I'm so glad she was able to find herself again after the devastation that was being a true soul. Anyway, that's my Unpacking Minthara video. I hope that made sense. I really loved getting to know her character, and doing playthroughs, like, specifically to get to know her, and I had fun unpacking her and really, like, sinking my teeth into her issues. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, maybe you should consider subscribing. If you like Baldur's Gate or Dungeons & Dragons or even anime, I talk about anime sometimes. wild. If you like any of those things, you should definitely hang out here more often. I think that's it for me. I hope you guys love Minthara. If you don't love Minthara, you should love Minthara. Yeah. My 2 favorite companions are Astarion and Minthara. What does that say about me? Who knows? Anyway, bye!